Okay, so let's officially begin. Welcome to Safe Sanctuaries training. I hope that in the next hour you find the information that we provide you relevant and useful when dealing with the youth here at St. Andrews. You all should have a folder that has the Safe Sanctuaries policy in it, as well as the attachments to the policy. And you will also have the slides for this presentation that you can refer back to as well. And I'll reiterate again, since this is the pilot group, we'd really like your feedback. If at any time you have a question or a comment, just feel free to raise your hand or blurt out even. I know that might go against your teacher grain, but we really do want input to make sure that this is the best it can be. As you can see, we have the support from our pastors. They've seen this policy and are in agreement with it, the way that we have developed it. I'll let you read that. Okay, the topics we will be covering during this training are why implement the Safe Sanctuaries policy, the review of the actual policy, what you need to do, and any questions. And then we'll turn in any completed forms that you fill out tonight. So why implement a policy at St. Andrews? First of all, to protect our children. We want to provide a safe physical environment and a safe emotional environment as well. And so that's our number one reason, is to protect the children that are here, that are trusting us to lead and guide them. Secondly, we want to protect our staff and volunteers, which are you. You need to know what the rules and parameters are so that you can effectively lead our children and so that you can not be found negligent in any way. This gives you clear guidelines to follow. We also want to protect our church. St. Andrews has a great reputation of having quality programming for children, and we want to uphold that by continuing to have a safe place for them to come. And also to provide guidance to help us make correct decisions when administering our programs. So in other words, if I know I'm going to have 30 children in a program, I can then, plan for that by how many grown-ups I think I will need to be present. Are there going to be youth helpers, and who will they pair with? And I can look at our policy and see that, oh yes, I can't let a youth lead on their own. They need to be with an adult. So it gives us great rules to follow. So the review of our policy, we'll first go over definitions, the application of the policy, which means who does this policy apply to, how we select workers, how we oversee the programs, appropriate boundaries, advance notice to parents, injuries to children, responding to allegations of child abuse, and a participation covenant, which is an agreement that you will sign that says, yes, I agree to follow these guidelines.
We're not going to go through all of the definitions that are in the policy, and on the left-hand side of your packet is actually the policy, or the Safe Sanctuary policies, and that's printed front and back to try and conserve. We will be providing this policy to everyone who goes through the trainings and who will be working with our children. When we refer to children in the Safe Sanctuary policies, instead of saying children and youth, children refers to anyone who is under the age of 18. Now, even though we will have some 18-year-olds who are involved in our youth programs, might be involved in our choirs, we definitely have a number of youth involved with ASP who are 18 and over. We have young people in youth group who reach the age of 18 before they graduate. So we will still apply these policies to those individuals when they're here as part of our programming. But for definitions, when we're talking about, especially when it comes to, as Chris mentioned, youth who are helping out and volunteering and helping with younger children, We use the term children to mean anyone who's under the age of 18. St. Andrews facilities means any location that's owned by us or temporarily controlled by us, including our vehicles. So basically our campus, which is this facility, the annex, of course we might do things in the parking lot, and then we use the bus, we use the van. Those all refer to St. Andrews facilities, because as long as it's something that we're involved with using or providing a program for. If we are going to ASP and we're traveling in those vehicles, that's considered St. Andrews facility, because it's something that is temporarily controlled by us and being used by us. Or if we're taking a group of kids to a concert someplace, or taking them to another church, or whatever it might be, those are considered St. Andrews facilities, because we are temporarily in control of, and we have a program that's involving our children in that St. Andrews program, which then program means any activity or event that's planned by St. Andrews that involves participation of either our children or their friends or their guests. So we're talking about Vacation Bible School. We're talking about youth ministry gatherings on Sunday nights. We're talking about confirmation trips up to the Islamic Mosque. We're talking about our Appalachia Service Project, or ASP trips in the summer. There are a huge number of things that we do that involve young people who are under the age of 18. And if it's something that we have planned and we're coordinating, that falls under that category or definition of program. A volunteer means any adult who is working with children for one of those St. Andrews programs. And staff then, of course, are a separate category, but a volunteer is anyone who's working with those young people. And in terms of who the policy applies to, it's obviously going to apply to any program that we are in charge of, that St. Andrews is actually in charge of and responsible for, regardless of location. Again, so if we're going to play laser tag at Qzar in Sylvania, or we're walking down to Trinity Episcopal to go to the Taizé worship service, or we're right here in this building having Vacation Bible School, those are considered to be programs, and our policies will apply to those. We also have a number of outside groups who come in and use our facilities, and many of them involve working with or involve children. We have Chrysalis who comes and uses our facilities they have 4 Chrysalis weekends here that are deep spiritual weekends for young people. And that happens 4 times a year. We have a Boy Scout troop that meets here, and they are here every week using the facility. We have other outside groups who often will come in and have special programs. We've hosted the Happy Weekend, which brings 150 area junior high school kids in. So any outside groups that use our facilities are also going to need to either follow our Safe Sanctuaries policies as they're written, or they will need to provide us with a copy of their policy, because they have adults who are working with people who are under the age of 18, and we expect them to follow certain guidelines. And so they'll supply us with their policies if they have them. We'll be able to review them and make sure that they meet, what our requirements are for keeping kids and adults safe. And then if they don't have their own policy, our policies will apply to them. And of course, whichever is the stricter policy will be the policy that we'll go with in terms of making sure. So even outside groups who come in and want to use our facilities and involve children here, we want to keep those children safe, because they're our children as well. In terms of selection of workers, one of the things that we're going to be requiring everyone to do, anyone who's going to be working with kids, will be required to allow us to run a request for a criminal record check or a background check. And this applies to all staff and then all volunteers who are working with children. So this is going to cover all of our youth workers. It's going to cover any of our Sunday school teachers who are teaching classes that, again, who are working with kids who are under the age of 18. It's going to, this is going to work all of our, anybody who's working with our music program with kids, anybody who's volunteering with Vacation Bible School. Ultimately, you know, this is going to be very, very far-reaching. But again, we are making that commitment to making sure that we're keeping the children and the youth who are here at St. Andrews safe. We run the criminal background checks through LexisNexis. It's a group that we've been using now for a number of years for ASP. It was the group that ASP has recommended that background checks run through. The cost is minimal because the fact that we are a church and we are a nonprofit, so we have a very extensive background check that checks criminal records across the United States, and it's for a very small cost. The more that we want to check, if we need to check licenses, if we need to check driving records for people who are going to be driving the van and the bus, then we spend a little bit more money to check that. If we felt like we needed to run a specific background check here of local courts, that's a little bit more expense, but right now we're not doing that given a lot of things, given the size of our community, given coverage by local media, given our proximity to law enforcement in the justice system, etc. So for right now, we're not adding that. But so the cost is pretty minimal. And right now, St. Andrews will be paying for that as we get everybody's background checks processed. All of that information remains completely confidential. Any results will be kept strictly confidential. The information that's needed for those will be kept in confidential files here at the church. Like I said, we've been using LexisNexis now for a number of years for ASP. I've also used it when Brian Williams and I have gone to confirmation camp with our kids the last couple of years. Everything remains completely confidential. And the way LexisNexis does the run is when I run a background check, I get a report back that will say that there are 0 derogatory reports, is what they refer to them as. They call them derogatory reports. That means that nothing has come back negative on someone. And again, this is a national records check. Now, in terms of disqualifying offenses, ultimately that's going to be determined by the leadership here at St. Andrews as to what we would see as being a disqualifying offense, what would keep someone from being able to work with our children and youth. And that would be something, again, that would come back as derogatory on that criminal background check, and then we would have the pastors and our staff parish relations chair take a look at that.
For selection of workers and volunteers, the format is fairly more discussional than an actual application there is to fill out. We are starting to have some applications being filled out probably from this point forward, so you will have a chance to do that for us tonight. Even if you've been volunteering with us for a long time, if you could provide us that information so we can start keeping a record of all of our volunteers and applicants. Now, most likely, when somebody in the church is looking to volunteer, or we're looking for volunteers, Deborah or I will meet with them and have a one-on-one interview, and just to discuss the role that they would like to fill as a volunteer and what the duties are, and maybe what expectations they have and what expectations we have. So it's very informal. Usually I kind of like to get to know people face to face instead of just on paper. There could possibly be a waiting period prior to working with children. We do live in a small community, and a lot of people know each other, and a lot of times people will come to St. Andrews and want to volunteer pretty quickly. And luckily, a lot of times it's somebody's cousin who knows them really well, and and stuff like that. But sometimes there may be people who want to volunteer that we don't know really well, and we may ask them to wait a 6-month time period just to have them attend regularly so we can get to know them a little bit better before we allow them to work with the children here. Okay, oversight of programs. This is kind of the nitty-gritty stuff that you're probably most interested in, especially if you work with some of the younger children. First of all is the visibility rule. All doors must be open when you're working with children unless there is a window in the door. That would need to allow viewing to a hallway, a central hallway, or an adjacent room that's being used as well. So for instance, if you are a Sunday school teacher up in the village and it's getting a little noisy in the hallway, maybe another class is getting a little noisy and you want to shut the door, that's perfectly fine because we have windows in those doors so that at any time somebody can look into your classroom and see what's going on. There is one exception, however, to this door policy, and that's whenever you're working with a child one-on-one, whether it's in some sort of counseling or even just a lesson, and if you're one-on-one with that child, the door must remain open, even if there's a window. The 2-adult rule. 2 adults must be on site at all times during any programming. There can never be a program just with only 1 adult and a group of children. There needs to be 2 adults. If possible, these adults need to be unrelated. Again, small community, it gets a little difficult sometimes, but that's probably the best option if there are 2 unrelated adults. And if possible, the 2 adults should be within the same space. This isn't always possible. For instance, Kids Club on Wednesdays, Dan might be out in the gym with some of the kids and Deborah may be in room 204 with the other kids. But they're still within the same vicinity. They're still within the same, they're in proximity that they could, yell and hear one another. They're not on opposite sides of the building. Bathroom facilities rule. This is the one for all you preschool people out there. Preschool children should be escorted to the restrooms, and you would wait outside for them unless they need assistance. If they do need assistance, they need help getting up onto the potty, or they need help buttoning their pants back up, you may provide assistance in that case if they request it. Otherwise, you just wait outside for them. Children who are older than preschool may or may not be escorted depending on a couple of factors. First of all, how well the child knows the St. Andrews building, and also the proximity of the bathrooms and the age of the child. So for instance, I'm going to use Kids Club again. It's Kids Club in the middle of the lesson, somebody needs to use the restroom. Well, we know it's nearby, and we know the child has been at St. Andrews for over a year at least, so they know where the restrooms are located. In that case, they are allowed to go to the restroom and come back on their own. However, if we ever have a guest or a new child, it would be best to escort them to the restrooms, because you all know how much of a maze this place can be, and we don't want anyone getting lost. Okay, the 5 years or older rule. A lead volunteer must be at least 5 years older than the group they are leading. So for instance, say I have an 18-year-old who would like to lead a group of high schoolers all on their own. They would not be allowed because they're not 5 years older than everyone participating in that program, so they may not lead that group.
But they can assist.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, which gets me to the next one, workers under the age of 18. They may not lead any group of children, but they can assist, and they have to have at least completed the 5th grade. So this summer I will have lots of kids that are going to be in 6th grade going, I want to help at BBS. And that's perfectly fine, and they can help and they can assist an adult, but they may not lead a group on their own. Computer usage rule. Children can receive permission and a password from an adult to get on the computers here at St. Andrews. However, that adult, by giving permission, also is committed to supervising that child using the computer. So they can't just turn the computer on, get the child started on the computer, and not come back for another half an hour or so, because by then, who knows where the child could have flipped to. So if you're going to be working with the computers, you need to be right there supervising how they're being used.
Along with that supervision follows, I guess, our role modeling and understanding what we're expecting, what some of our expectations are for kids. And some of a lot of our youth are becoming familiar with now. If they do something with me, pretty much what we do is a t-shirt only policy, which means that that they have to wear t-shirts that have sleeves. Typically they're a crew neck, they're not low cut, they're not tight fitting. You know, if anybody has ever gotten one of the emails from me about we're going to visit the mosque, here's what you can wear, here's what I will not see you in. Those are I'm very straightforward about that with the kids. And so we have participated, like I said, in ASP. We have kids who have been going up to Lakeside to camp in the summer for a long time, and both of those are t-shirt only policies in terms of what kids can wear and what we as adults wear and model. I mean, long sleeves are fine, but basically the idea is that we don't wear spaghetti straps or strapless or just a variety of different things that are in today's style, but we don't feel that they're modest dressed and appropriate for what our expectations are in terms of where our focus is and why we're doing what we're doing. So whatever the dress code might be, it needs to be suitable for the activity and communicated by the St. Andrews person in charge, which means that as volunteers, you will probably hear from us, here's what we're expecting the kids to be wearing, this is how I'm planning to be dressing for the week, and this is how we would like for you to, these are the dress guidelines that we would like for you to follow for the week. So Chris and I have talked about that a little bit. Again, you know, especially in the summertime when we're doing activities and we're in and out of the building, it's something that to help us to teach some modesty and humbleness and kind of where we're focusing, again, why we're here and what we're focusing on. So we are asking adults to follow those same dress codes that we're asking the kids to follow. Likewise with language, there's a lot of language that's used today that's part of everyday slang that you know, kids will say back and forth to each other, and adults might even say to one another, but we need to be very careful in terms of the language that we're using, that we're watching what we're saying, and again, that we are setting the rule, or that we are setting the role. That the kids are going to follow our lead, and so if they find that we're free throwing you know, different words around that maybe make people kind of cringe, they're just sort of on the cusp, they're not those words that you get your mouth washed out at home, but they're also not words that your parents really want you to say. We got to be careful with that kind of thing, because again, we're the ones that are leading the way. So and we believe that this dress and language is part of that appropriate interpersonal boundaries, because we are there as their friends and as their guides, but we also are there as role models for them, and so it's up to us to kind of help set what those boundaries are. The last one is a tough one. It's demonstration of affection, and you know, some of us just are huggers. You know, a kid just does something, a young person, and I find myself, you know, I'm just overcome with emotion and I reach out and I hug. And we need to be very, very careful. And I say we, in that I'm part of that as well. You know, just some common sense in terms of making that physical contact and being very careful. One is to make sure that it's welcomed by the child receiving the hug or the pat or whatever. Obviously, if a child has a tendency to pull away, then we don't, you know, there's no pushing that. There's, you know, obviously there's a personal space issue and boundary, and we need to understand that, and we need to appreciate that and give that child their space. I would also suggest that if, you know, it's okay to hug a kid. It might be good to ask them though, can I give you a hug? You know, that just, you know, I feel like you need a hug. I feel, or, you know, if it's something that they're very emotional about, or if you just say, wow, that was just so, can I hug you to say thank you? But, you know, again, I would not do that in a room where it's just the two of you. You know, maybe if it's out in Fellowship Hall at Wow Chow night, and you know, and I've done this before. Kids have given me Christmas presents, and oh, I grab them and I hug them and kiss them on the top of the head, or just, you know, just get so. But I'm, you know, we're out in a very public area, and so that's one of the things in terms of boundaries that we need to be careful of, and make sure that, again, the child that's receiving that affection is welcoming it. And I want to share something with you that I just feel like God put in front of me today. I'm reading a book by Mark Yaconelli, who is this amazing youth ministry person that I've heard speak before, and it's called Contemplative Youth Ministry. And I've just started reading it, trying to take our youth ministry a little deeper. But he says something about hugs here that just really, really struck me, and God put this in front of me literally today. In the introduction, this one paragraph, he says, although I've spent 16 years studying, teaching, and practicing youth ministry, I must confess that I was never involved in a youth ministry program when I was an adolescent. The church I attended as a young person was small and rural. It had neither a youth group nor Sunday school classes. What it did have, however, was a time during each worship service in which people were invited to stand and greet one another. This time of greeting was always, and still is, the longest period of the service. I know we can't do that. As people took the time to hug and converse with every other person in the room. Each Sunday, whether I was sulking in the back row, hiding in the kitchen, or immersed in my conversations with friends, people found me, asked how I was, listened to my words, and here's the part, and hugged me to their chests. I read that in tears, like flowed down my face today. I know I'm a Christian today because those people were present to me during my adolescence. They listened openly to my questions, received me, looked at me with wonder, and saw within me a unique revelation of the presence of God. Those Sunday morning hugs meant so much to Mark Yaconelli as he was growing up. So I'm not saying we can't hug our kids, but we do realize that we need to be more careful, more aware, and probably a little bit more intentional in terms of making that contact. And again, making sure that it's something that is welcomed and that it's okay by the child. And then the next part of part of the policy just talks about advance notice to parents. We will make sure that we continue to communicate information about our programs in advance. We do this in a variety of different ways. It's printed, you know, almost everything that we do is printed each week in the messenger. There are inserts. We send out emails. We send out more emails. We send out, sometimes we send out regular mailings. We don't do too much of that anymore. Email is much more cost effective, but we might send out some flyers. We put up posters. We make announcements. We send out emails. We send some text messages. We send out emails. So, you know, we do a lot of things to try and make sure that the parents know in advance about programs so that what's going on isn't sprung on them. Again, that is to help parents and youth feel comfortable in terms of what we're doing, what we're offering, and making sure that we're staying in communication with them on a very regular basis. One of the forms in the back of your packet that you aren't being asked to fill out tonight, but there are people in here who've had to fill these out now for a while. We do have what we call medical forms, but they're actually authorization forms for emergency medical needs. And these are forms that we'll have to have on file, and we do for the most part now for any child, someone under the age of 18, who is going to be involved with programs here at the church. Chris uses slightly different forms for Vacation Bible School because we have so many visitors that are in and out. But I'm pretty fanatical about it when it comes to kids that are involved in our programs throughout the year. I have medical forms, emergency medical forms for every kid. If we go off somewhere again and we play laser tag or Ken rolls and I get to spend the night here in the church on a Sunday night with them playing.
And somebody trips and puts
Yeah, exactly. Just trips and falls down the stairs because they weren't running. because they weren't, because we asked them not to. But you know, we're here playing Nerf Mania and somebody gets hurt. That's the information that we need. And so those medical forms are required for any off-site program because we're transporting kids off-site. And it says they may be required for on-site programs, but they will be required. So that's another form that we use to try and help keep our kids safe. And again, I mean, we have to make phone calls to parents. We had to, you know, have somebody's dad come and get him because he hurt his ankle the night we had Nerf Mania. We had a young girl who just, her stomach was bothering her. She needed to go home early. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so that's really important information that we need.
Minor injuries are what you'll most likely deal with. Just cuts and bruises, you know, maybe twisting of an ankle or a wrist occasionally. The location of the first aid kits is in your packet. There's a half-sheet handout. There are first aid kits on every floor, and they're all stocked. I checked them myself. I'll let you look at where those are located. So think about the areas where you volunteer most, and maybe next time you're volunteering, just locate one of those and find where it is so that, you know, if an emergency should happen, you'd be able to find it quickly since you've seen it before. I know they kind of blend into the background unless you're really looking for them. So if you have a minor injury, it's fine to treat it yourself, a small cut, maybe you need an ice pack for a twisted ankle. That we would just treat here. Serious injuries, we need to notify parents and assist the child, as Deborah said, in their medical form, and notify any supervisor or staff member that's responsible for that program. And then also there will be an incident report form that you would fill out if you were in charge of the program, or if you saw the incident happen, then you fill that out. And those are located in our first aid kits. And Deborah and I also have copies of those.
And then unfortunately, sometimes the injuries that can occur are greater than a cut or a scrape or a twisted ankle or an upset stomach. These are defined. I won't go into the definitions, but in the Safe Sanctuaries policies, we have indeed defined physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. So this next section is what we need to do in responding to allegations of child abuse, and if it falls into any of these categories. And like I said, these are defined in the policies, these 4 different areas, and I'm not gonna go through those now, but want to talk about what we've set up as our policies. The first thing is to report the suspected child abuse to the senior pastor. Now, if the senior pastor is suspected of the abuse, then that information will have to be reported to the staff parish relations chair, which means that we will, as staff who are working in these areas especially, need to become more familiar with who those people are, who that individual is, as will the leaders of our different ministry areas need to know who that staff parish relations person is, should he or she need to step in the situation where the suspected abuse might be by the senior pastor. If the incident occurs during one of our programs, we will immediately notify the parents. If we need to notify appropriate authorities, that will be done. We'll cooperate, of course, with any formal investigation that takes place. Where needed, conduct an internal investigation. Again, if it involves a member of our staff or one of the pastors, we would need to undergo an internal investigation. And anyone who is not found innocent of child abuse then will be prohibited from working with children at St. Andrews. So as soon as, you know, if that happens, that person will immediately be removed from that volunteer position or that staff position if it happens to be a staff person. If there is an internal investigation that takes place, the team is going to include a number of folks, but most definitely the senior pastor, unless, again, he or she is the person that the allegation is against. the supervisor of the affected staff person. So if it involves a staff person, for instance, if I were alleged to have perpetrated some type of abuse, Pastor Debbie is my supervisor, so she would be part of that internal team. And then others, as the senior pastor, would see fit to bring on that team to look into and investigate the allegations. The extended team might include a United Methodist District Superintendent. Again, if it would happen to be one of our pastors, perhaps an attorney for the church, and possibly our insurance company, depending upon what the allegation is and maybe the extent to which there might be additional legal expenses and potential damages that might be sued for. So that internal investigation we would take very, very seriously, any investigation very seriously, and the size of the team would again depend upon who is alleged to have been involved in the abuse. Also, obviously, in situations like this, we always need to have just one person speaking to the public. This is not, for public fodder type of thing. So the senior pastor, his or her designate, would be our one person who would be speaking to the public, which would include the senior pastor, being open and transparent with our congregation, talking about the fact that we might have a situation on hand and what's being done, and being open and, like I said, open and honest with the congregation about what's going on.
So now that we've reviewed the policy, this is what you need to do. Complete the training while you're here, so that you can check off. Complete attachment A, which is the authorization for the background check. Complete attachment B, which is just our application, our volunteer application. If you would kindly do that for us, even though you are currently volunteering, and we'd love to still have you volunteer. Complete attachment E, which is the participation covenant, and that kind of is an agreement between the volunteers and staff and St. Andrews. And then just to provide these completed forms to the church office, you can either complete them here tonight after this, or if you want to take time to look at this at home further and complete them at home and then bring them in, that would be fine as well.
And those are on the right side. Those three forms are separate forms on the right side of your folders behind your slides and notes. So you don't have to rip them out of the policies that we gave you. The ones that are attached to the policies are for you to keep.
I don't know what your next slide looks like. It may not read, but the policy is available at the St. Andrews Methodist Church website, and you can find that by selecting Safe Sanctuaries policy, or you can visit the church office. The church office will always have a copy on hand. And of course you have a copy that you've been given tonight to keep for yourself. Yeah, any questions, any comments? Anything we can clarify?
No, just great job. The church council approved this, and they did a lot of scrutiny and had ample time to look at your good work, and it's so clear, and your PowerPoint follows it extremely carefully, and you've done a wonderful job explaining this tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I can just say, I was part of a church that had a potential abuse, but because our policy was so much in place, attorneys and insurance company were A-OK with everything, the person who might have followed through with the suit, legal action, backed off, because I think they could see everything was in good shape. So that's how important that is.
Yeah. Mike?
Go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, how often will this training be conducted from a standpoint, I'm thinking of programs in the summer when you have volunteers coming in, let's say for VBS or something. Is this going to be a rateable thing for people to attend in advance, or?
Right. Right now, we'll probably offer it quite a bit as we're getting started up and getting our volunteers run through it. And we're also looking into, and as we're being recorded tonight, recording another time and possibly making it available. I don't know how you want to say online, or and then you would take a quiz or something afterwards. And we're looking into some other ideas. But for now, we're going to offer it quite a bit through the spring and through the summer because I do have a lot of volunteers coming up in VBS.
My recommendation, if you did that, is maybe try to get people to attend the first one and use that as a refreshment option, maybe more than a first training option. You can do whatever you like, but that's
I think that's our
a
plan,
suggestion.
Ken. But I think there may be cases where there's a trade-off there, obviously, and we want to be sensitive to that. So we may talk a little bit more about that with church council. But the challenge we have is that we want to have good volunteers, and we want to make sure we comply with the policy. So if we have people that we think we're pretty comfortable with that aren't able to make it to the training, so now we've got a trade-off. Do we shortchange ourselves and have one less volunteer and put the children at risk because we don't have enough volunteers? Or do we allow them to take the training remotely and thus be able to properly participate, comply with our policy, and then have the benefit of those people being there to safeguard the children in other ways? So there's a balance to be struck there, I think, and it's really our responsibility on the education community to kind of manage that with some guidance, I think, from church council. So we're going to have more discussion about that, but I think it's going to have to be on a case-by-case basis when we allow people to take it remotely. But I can see cases where it's going to be, what we're trying to do here is manage risk. We definitely want to make sure we comply with the policy. We definitely want to make sure that we keep the kids safe. So that we just have to balance, that risk. And so appreciate the input and guidance of this group to help us do that.
Do we want to mention the defibrillator along with the first aid kits?
Okay.
Yeah, that was on my list.
That's a good idea.
That should be on every safety list, just so it's not
Okay,
forgotten.
so good idea. We'll change our slide here. Make sure you write that down too, Deborah. I'm going to take a note here. But
And correct me, we have one defibrillator and it's in the kitchen, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
Oh, yeah, Christine.
As volunteers with the church, working with our the children, are we mandated reporters as far as if we see a situation with a child that, as far as if you're training the volunteers, what they should do if they see something like that?
Deborah, was that the
That's a
question
good
we were
question,
talking
right.
about?
Yeah, and
okay.
I am in the process of finding out from the West Ohio Conference what the church's requirements are so that we follow, and then we'll present that. Again, that'll be one of those things we'll talk about in education and present to church council, and if that's, if we feel that that's strict enough or strong enough in terms of the position that we want to take. So we're still trying to, that's a good question, and we are still working on figuring that out. That's one of the things that we're still checking.
I would think,
I would think so,
that
right, but
since the policy reads that if there's an incident, it's reported to, like the senior pastor. Both Debbie and I are mandatory reporters. So, and that doesn't mean anything would happen if we report it, because sometimes I've called, well, in Cincinnati area, it was 241 kids. And when I described the situation, they'd say, no, that's not abuse, no need to investigate.
Emergency medical, will they be in a place that's accessible by adult supervising groups?
I know, for instance, for Vacation Bible School, we keep them centrally located in the kitchen, and all the volunteers know that that's where they're located and they're not to be moved, so that if there was an emergency, that's directly where we go to get that information. And I believe, Deborah, you also carry yours with you.
and keep them right. And then, and when we're in vehicles, like the people who drive for us on Wednesdays, they have copies of the emergency
take
medicals,
copies,
right,
don't
they have
they?
copies. When we go on ASP, we have, every van has, if we have 40 volunteers, every van has 40 medical forms, even for the adults that are on the trip. So
I know.
we try to keep them as accessible as possible.
I know in the policy, it says there's a discretion there, especially if the program's inside the church.
Yeah, for instance, I don't have medical forms for kids for Sunday school.
Right.
Deborah does have them for like kids club, but yeah, anything Sunday morning related, there's no medical forms for.
Yeah, I guess I'm coming from a school administrator background. I like the policy the way it's written. I like the discretion it gives you, but I would encourage you to have as many children's emergency medical on file as possible because of the information that's there is so critical for quick action.
That's a good idea.
You may not be able to find parents.
Right now, we
Right, like we would have them
copies
fill out
of
when they register for Sunday school and then keep them filed. Well, you know, I don't know,
we just,
because it's confidential info, we might have to bring it up to there, unless we had a secure place we could lock them up. I don't know,
and it's a
it's very much.
blessing and curse right now. We don't have very many children in our Sunday school that don't have an adult here with them in the building, a family adult, a parent or a grandparent. Now, if we were sending out a bus collecting other kids, it would be, I'd be more concerned about it, I guess. And
I
it
guess
would be a
I've
good
been in
thing
a
to have more
situation as
kids.
an administrator.
Oh,
where I
yeah,
had
I'm
to
not
call-
arguing that
where I
we
had to-
should.
No, I'm not either. Where I had to call in an emergency squad. And I was called in to question by the superintendent. Well, okay, I had the emergency medical there. To me, it was life and death. I called the emergency squad and was criticized a little bit for it, but hey, at least I had the form right there. I just err on the side of safety on that one. I know it's like chasing cats, or herding cats, right? Herding cats.
Either way.
Either way, yeah. Squirrels. Yeah. It's just important. If it's my child and they fall and they get hurt and they can't find me, they might have to move to level 2 without me.
And I like that idea because we do have some parents that go, you know, get breakfast while the kids are at Sunday school, and then, you know, we'd have a hard time getting a hold of mom or dad, so.
I think Ken had.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about a couple of things that maybe should or shouldn't be in the policy. Yeah, I don't know whether you're thinking of having like a frequently asked questions or something like that that would go with it, or whether, I've got a couple things I'm going to comment on, whether you may want to have some additional things that are appropriate for the group that they're in. But I know that with some of our groups, we pay close attention to which doors are open and which doors are locked. And that wasn't addressed in this, but I know that as a practice, somebody's thinking about that, because depending on when the activity is and whether it's at night or so on, somebody's going around and making sure the doors are appropriately locked for the group. So if that's something we're doing, then we probably ought to mention it, that we're doing it so that all do it. Since it's something that could change, then you may not want it in the policy. You may want it, or it provides you the flexibility to do what's appropriate for the group and for the time. We talked a lot about what goes on here, but the one critical point that we sometimes see in schools is it's the drop-off and the pickup. And making sure, especially at the younger age, that the kids get to the right people. And so it's not anything that was addressed here, but I know that we're doing things. I know when they're young at Bible school, everybody has to go to a classroom to pick up a kid. You don't just get them in the middle of the room, and we're doing other things to make sure that kids get to the right place given what their age is. So that may be something that you also address. Either perhaps you already do it with your younger age group, so it's okay, it's covered. Maybe it's something you just add as a frequently asked question, or something that's just a highlighter for special things like that.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. We just recently had to reiterate to parents that only parents can pick up from Sunday school. Older siblings can't, and we can't just release them. And we have had a little bit of trouble getting parents used to that, because they're talking, and then their kid's waiting around forever wondering where their parent is, and they just want to go, and, you know, it's been a little hard. So I do like that way, because some volunteers were used to the old system where we just let them go and find mom and dad because they're used to St. Andrews. And so yeah, if we had that written down so new volunteers coming in know that you just can't let them go. That's a great idea.
The only other thing I'd say is hopefully we got a list on this. Depending on how things go over the next couple of years, we may have different kinds of training, and people themselves may not even remember what they've done and what they haven't. So hopefully there'll be a list that's easily found that we know who is and who isn't, and so when we start looking for volunteers, the leaders can figure that out and know when they've been refreshed.
Well, you know, that's a good point, Ken, is that normally when you have these trainings, you have a sign-in sheet. And that's a good lesson learned for us. The education chair failed to provide a sign-in sheet this evening.
That's all right, you brought a video camera.
Yeah.
But you're not gonna get fired.
And we're all on film.
Learn on the way out.
Yeah. Well, and I'm gonna turn the lights on, because I just realized we could probably have the lights on, but, Ken, the points about the, locked doors and so forth too. We do have a safety task force that's gonna be meeting. The first meeting is this Saturday, that Phil Lucas is heading up just to take a look at overall security and safety of the building, and that's gonna encompass a lot of, there's gonna be a lot, I think, that's probably gonna fall under that. And so I think that it'll be good for us to include maybe in that FAQ list, if not a specific statement in these policies, that we will obviously, that our Safe Sanctuaries policies will always follow the guidelines as set forth by that safety task force, or however those end up coming down. But you know, we will definitely follow what, you know, is set up by that group too. So that kind of, I made a mental note of that, or another note. Yeah.
And one of the things too
Turn the lights on back here.
that we didn't cover tonight, but that is in the policy, is that we're going to review this policy anyway. So to the extent that things come up that need to be added, we will track those, and then annually we're going to update the policy with the things that we think meet the threshold of, you know, being appropriately added. And we'll do that in conjunction with the safety policy, you know, because there's some overlap here, that some of these things, well, does it go in safety or does it go in safe sanctuaries? And as long as we have it in a policy, as Deborah kind of mentioned, we probably want to have it one place and have it very clear, but we can talk about that.
Do you have a copy of the emergency medical? Is it in here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's one of your attachments to your, I don't know what,
Yeah, it's
I don't know what
attachment
order
C,
it's
Mark.
in. Yeah, it's on your
Oh, it's
left-hand side, the
Yeah, attachment
copy
C.
that you got. Now, where exactly it shows up, because since those are a
Oh,
little
okay,
out of
that's-
order, but it's in there.
Front of the last.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
This,
authorization to consent for treatment of a minor.
I'm sticking on this one a little bit here, just because been there, done that. It's one thing to take the forms with you. It's another thing to have read the forms. I'm thinking of silly little things like my granddaughter that has an allergy to nuts and has to carry a pen with her, you know, that would save her life. So there's so many things that you can't say everything in these policies, and yet there's some practices that can go along with this without getting over into the writing of them that can be handled in the end service. I just think that's really important to note. We can have something on file and yet never pay any attention to it. So whoever has the kids really needs to be sensitive to some of these things, and it raises the second question. We're not a school, but in a similar way, schools have all these emergency medicines down in the office with the secretary. And there's been a lot of law debated about that. So if something, you have a bee sting, for example, you a bee flies in the window, stings your child, child's allergic. You know right away, you go right to the office. I don't know how to flush all that out, whether you can go to that extent, whether that's unreasonable, but something to think about certainly.
I know in BBS when we've had kids with EpiPens,
Yes, EpiPens.
we give them to their group leader carries them with them
That's
at all
wonderful.
times. And then any kids that have allergies that we've seen on their medical forms are, I don't know if this is a good practice or bad practice, but we put bracelets on them that identify them as having an allergy.
That's all out, that's wonderful.
But I know that, but yeah, you're right, and not
Yeah.
necessarily everyone else. You know, I know when I do a program, I know who has the allergies, and I go to those teachers, but maybe it should be more broadly known.
Well, I think they can know that emergency medicals are here, and it's probably wise to take a look at them. I know we took our granddaughter to church. I really think she didn't go to Sunday school because Mom had talked about concern about hens not to eat. So, Grandma put that 2 and 2 together, figured that one out. She always went with school. Make that happen. This is very thorough.
I just wanted to comment that having the slides out so you could write notes, I always like that. I appreciate you did that. I thought the slides did a very nice job of being a summary versus the specific that was in the policy. I think the blend of that and the trade-off technique that you used, all of that was very good. I think the presentation was very good in a lot of ways. So kudos to all who had to work to do that.
And thanks again for coming out tonight. And again, if you think of something when you get home, email us. Let us know so that we can make any changes necessary for our next group, since you guys were kind of our guinea pigs. We appreciate that.